Hello, Shelley from Spin Cushions here, Crochet Designs by Shelley Husband. Today I'm going to show you how to make part 4 of my Granny Square Academy. This is called Spiky Sally. So she has these cool spike stitches all the way through. And this time she starts out as a circle instead of starting out as a square. So let's see how we do that. We're going to start, as we have before, by attaching our yarn to our hook with a slip knot. Then we are going to chain 1, which is where we're going to work all of our first round stitches. And we're going to chain 3 more, and that chain 3 pretends to be our first stitch. Now this time's different to all our other times. There's no corners, so we're just going to work 11 stitches into this first chain. So plus the chain 3, we'll end up with 12 stitches. I can do it without fumbling. Excuse the banging you can hear in the background if you can. There's one of my kids at home who's supposed to be being quiet. Okay, 1, 2. The more stitches you do, the easier it will get because the hole will get slightly bigger. All right, I'm going to keep going and do those stitches, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end. Okay, one more stitch to do. And make sure you have got enough. I like to count backwards before I join up. So this stitch here is the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and chain 3 is our 12th. Now we join with a slip stitch to the top of our third chain, which can be hard to see through the camera. There we go. All right, so there we go. There's our round 1, a nice little circle. Round 2, we're going to start with chain 3 as our first stitch. Then we're going to do 2 stitches in the same place we joined as our slip stitch. So it's a nice big hole if you've just joined to that third chain, as I recommend. And then we are going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and in the next stitch we're going to work on our corner, which is 3 stitches, chain 2, 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, all in the same stitch. Doesn't feel like that many stitches will fit in there, but they will. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and work another corner here, skip 2, another corner here, and then we'll have 2 to skip. So I'll do that all the way around and show you the end. Okay, so now I just need to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2. That looks like another stitch, but it's not. That's actually the slip stitch we joined with. So just ignore that and work over here. Look at the base of those first stitches. We need to do 3 stitches there to finish off that first corner. Then we're going to chain 1 and join with a double crochet UK, single crochet US to the top loop of your third chain. Okay, done. All right, now we're going to do double crochets US, UK, or single crochets US all the way around, as well as do our first spike stitches. So the first one to do is over the joining stitch. So no yarn over, poke your hook in the big hole, pull a loop up, yarn over and pull through 2. Now it can be quite handy when you're not used to doing these stitches to pop a stitch marker in that first stitch after you've made it. I'll show you why that's handy at the end. Now we're going to do the same stitch in the next 2 stitches. This first one here is our chain 3. 1, and then the next stitch, 2. Now it's time to do our first spike stitches. Whoops, sorry, excuse me. So these 2 stitches we skipped below is where we're going to work them. So you poke your hook in that first stitch down there, pull up a loop, don't just stop there, pull up a long loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and in the next stitch again pull up a long loop, and there's spike stitches, spike double crochets UK, spike single crochets US, And they've kind of worked over 2 stitches, so you should only have 2 stitches left where we do that small stitch in the last 2 stitches. 1, 2. Now our corner this time is 1 stitch, chain 2, 1 stitch in the 2 chain space. Okay, I'm going to do that again. 1 in here, first stitch, second stitch. Now we're going to do our spikes. So in, pull up a long loop, like longer than you probably think you need to. And in there, another long loop. And in the last 2. Refer to the reading and the pattern help for help if you're having trouble with your spikes. I'll do that all the way around and show you how to finish off the round. Okay, so I've done all of my repeats. I just need to do 1 stitch in the same place as our first stitch, which is here. Then I'm going to chain 1 and join with a double crochet UK term, single crochet US to where that stitch marker is. I'm going to pull that out and I'm going to pop my yarn in there. Okay, now it may be tricky to see what you've just done, but you've just created a chain space. So this gap here, pop a stitch marker in there, or you can pop a scrap of yarn in before you join if that's easier. Refer to the pattern help for more info. And we're off on the next round. So chain 3 for our first stitch, then over the joining stitch, which is where that stitch marker is. That shows you where that stitch goes. And don't take it out because you'll still need it for the end of this round as well. Then we are going to do a stitch in every stitch along. So the first one is where we joined to. You'll see it's sort of got 2 little lines worked into it there. That's where we do our first stitch and 1 in every stitch along, just like with our solid pattern. And the corners are 2 stitches, chain 2, 2 stitches. Again, we're doing treble crochets UK terms, double crochets US terms, all the way around. So I'll go all the way around and then show you what it looks like at the very end. All right, I've done my stitches all the way along the side. I just need to do 2 stitches in the same space as our first stitch, which is where that stitch marker is that we popped in at the beginning. A scrap of yarn works just as well. You don't need fancy stitch markers. I'm going to take that out now. All right, so I've done my 2 stitches. I just need to chain 1 and join with a stitch to the top of our third chain, which is here. All right, so now we are going to do another spike and small stitch round. So 1 over the joining stitch in that big hole. Pop a stitch marker in that stitch if you need the reminder. Then we're going to do 1 in the next 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we do spike stitches in the next 2. So when you have a look down, that's your next stitch. You want to go down to the base of it to do the spike, and it should be above the spike of your previous round, previous time we did it. 1, 2, you should have 5 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to do a small stitch in. And again, the corners are 1 stitch, chain 2, 1 stitch. So I'll do that all the way around and show you what's next. All right, I've been all the way around, I've done my repeats. So now I am going to do a stitch in the same place as our first one. And we're going to chain 1 and join with a stitch. This time I'm going to show you what I mean by popping a scrap of yarn in. So I've chained 1. I'm just going to put this leftover bit of yarn in that gap before I join to this first stitch with a stitch. So that bit of yarn is the same purpose as a stitch marker, it just shows you the gap you need to work into. So this round, we're going to do another solid round, but instead of doing 2 stitches in each corner, we're just doing 1 stitch, chain 2, 1 stitch. So we chain 3 and we don't do a stitch over the joining stitch, we just go straight to working a stitch here and in every stitch along the side. And the corners are 1 stitch, chain 2, 1 stitch. I'm sure you can handle that. I'll go all the way around and I'll show you how to finish off this round. Okay, so I've done all of my stitches around. I just need to do one stitch in the same place as our first stitch, just there. And we're going to chain one and join with a stitch to our top of our third chain of our starting chain. Now the next round is going to be a round of spikes and double crochets again. We start with double crochets UK, single crochets US, small stitches. Start with one over the joining stitch, one in the next 3 stitches, the first one in that loop where we joined the top of our third chain, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to do 2 spike stitches. So look for the next stitch. Instead of going in, go down to the bottom of the post, pull up your loop, 1, 2, then a stitch in the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then 2 more spike stitches. It should be in the stitch above the spike stitches from before, which is 2 more normal stitches, small ones, 1, 2, 2 more spike stitches, 1, 2, and we should have 3 stitches left to do a small stitch in before we get to our corner, which is just 1 stitch, chain 2 and 1 stitch. So I will do that all the way around, and then we'll just have one more very easy round to do. I'll show you what happens next. All right, I'm back to the start. I just need to do a stitch in the same space as our first stitches. Then we're going to chain 1, and if you still need to, pop a scrap of yarn in that gap, and we're going to join with a small stitch to our first stitch. Okay, and the last round is just a round of our small stitches. So the first one goes where that scrap of yarn is, and if you need the other reminder of where to find that stitch at the end, pop a stitch marker in that one as well. Different to what you're doing for your corner, so you can tell that's where you work your last stitch, that's where you join. Then it's a stitch in every stitch along the side, and our corners are 1 stitch, chain 2, 1 stitch in the 2 chain spaces. So I will work my way all the way around and show you how to finish off this end bit. Okay, I've done my stitches all the way around. I just need to do one in the same place as our first stitch, which is where that scrap of yarn is. And I can take that out now. And then I'm going to chain 2 and join to this first stitch that we marked with that stitch marker. Whoops, sorry, you're bumping the camera. Slip stitch, and we are done. I've actually already cut the yarn. Cheated. And there we go. Our Spiky Shelley. She will need a bit of blocking to help even her out with all of those spike stitches that you've done, because they can be hard to keep even tension. There you go. There we have it. Spiky Shelley from Granny Square Academy, part 4 done. If you'd like to find out more, just head to spincushions.com and look for the Granny Square Academy tab. Thanks very much. Bye.